Hello, welcome to another Pauper matchup data analysis video. I am your host Kirb, and today we will be going on a journey of what MH3 has done to Pauper. So we're going to look at what decks are beating what's happened, and stuff like that. So this is for the period over MH3 to 2 weeks after Bloomburrow, I believe. So it's 9 weeks covering 20 weekend challenges, a showcase qualifier, and a showcase. So it gives you total matches down there. It's a lot of matches to cover. So it's a good data set. But there's something you may be wondering. There's 20 challenges over 9 weeks. Shouldn't it be 3 times 9 equals 27? Shouldn't it be 27, not 20? Well, we're missing 7 challenges. It's because 2 of them didn't fire. One was due to Paupergeddon, and then one was a couple of weeks later and just didn't have enough people to fire. And 5 challenges I couldn't get all the data for. So I had to not use them. And why was this? It's because of what I've been calling the data breach. So 2 weeks into MH3, just deck list didn't appear, and then so Magic Online, the Twitter account, sent a tweet saying they've taken down the deck list page. They'll update the community once there's more to share. So everyone thought there was just something going on with the program they used to actually read the deck lists and whatnot. On the Discord, so there was people were trying to figure out what was actually going on. There wasn't any update anywhere other than on the Discord, in which there was a week later, they understand everyone's frustration of not having access to the deck list page, don't have anything to update. More information would be provided when I sent out. But then on Twitter, 3 weeks later, so 2 weeks after this, you can see the date stamps here. I was 1 week after this, a week and a half. So it's almost 3 weeks later, so it's 2.5 weeks. Saying that only the top 32 of every schedule event will be displayed, and a selection of 5.0 lists, not all of them, which is a shame, because when Daybreak first got, maybe a couple of months after Daybreak took over MTGO, they started publishing every deck list, which was great. It was a data feast. You could have whatever you wanted. And then something broke, and then they did this. So everyone's thinking that they've given out too much data, and Wizards didn't like it. I don't know if this is the case or not, but it's a shame. So why can't we just use the top 32 lists? Well, there's a problem in which I did this with the first one. And when you don't know what the decks are, everything gets skewed. So if we ignore unknown, well, the problem is we can't really ignore it, right? Because this could be any of these. This 32 could all be Affinity, and then the percentage of the meta would be huge, right? It just skews meta percentage way too much that I had to ignore every challenge that I couldn't get. So that was 5 of these. and look at the win rates. Because unknown is all the bottom 30, well, in this case there was exactly 64 players. But if you ignore the bottom things, you ignore all the losers. So pretty much every deck has a positive win rate, because they're the only ones that made top 32. I still have used all of these challenges. I've made me spreadsheets or whatever for these challenges. And I can use the matchup data for the top 32, Affinity versing Walls, right? If they beat Walls in the top 32, that still counts. There's 1 win here and 1 loss here. So you can use these still. You just can't use anything that versus unknown. In the matchup data, I'll be using these extra 5 challenges for whatever I can. But for overall meta percent and win percent, I have to ignore these 5 challenges. So what's the solution to this? We have to go back, Kate. We have to go back to watching replays, which is annoying, but I'm pretty used to it by now. Requires more effort, because now instead of just taking a screenshot of the challenge and collating all the decks from the decklist page and getting all the matchup data that way, I have to now watch the replays after the challenge has ended just to get the full list. It just takes more time, and also I can't join every challenge. the Sunday challenge starts at 3 a.m. in the morning for me on Monday, and I have to go to work at 7, so it's just feasibly impossible. And even the Friday one starts at 11 p.m. for me. Usually I just go 0-3 drop, but sometimes I try to play and then have to finish at 3 a.m. and sometimes I just don't want to do that. So I wouldn't mind some help. So mainly for the Sunday challenge, I just want someone to be able to help look at replays for me. GN, real thanks shout out to GN42. They've given me the last, well, they asked if they could help, and they've done the last 2 Sunday challenges for me, which has been a massive help. But if anyone watching this plays any challenge at some point, or if you're a regular, please let me know if you're willing to watch some replays to just tell me what decks for the bottom 32 are. I would gladly appreciate it. Even like Friday or a Saturday. I wouldn't mind taking a Friday or a Saturday off, but they're just used to it by now. Any help would be appreciated, please. So, back on topic. So what's changed? Well, from my very first one, so 2 videos ago, I nicknamed the top 5 decks, the big 5. So the King was the name for Blue Black Fae, and Core Gates didn't have a name because it wasn't part of the big 5 at that point. But these 2 decks were, in the last meta, very high up there. Both of them are now dead. So this is a meta percent from the last video, and this is for this current video. So we can see right down the bottom here, Core Gates from 10% down to 2.5, and Dimir Fae like down to 0.63. It almost doesn't exist. Kuldotha's all down here as well, but if you look at Affinity, which gained new toys while Red didn't, they've pretty much just swapped, right? So, like, +4, -5. So, Kuldotha's still, like, got a high percentage. It just doesn't have as big as it did before. And then there's a pile of other things that have dropped to, like, negligible. There's some things that have climbed, like Mono Blue Terror's getting up there, like both Terror decks, Hexproof and Izzet Control had a little bit of time in the sun. But mainly what I wanted to point across is that these 2 decks are dead. So, and why was this? It's because of MH3, obviously. That's why we're doing this video. So, putting a little spew of cards here. So, we've got Reverse Familiar for Affinity. We've got Sneaky Snacker for Madness. We have the Gruul ramp package that has made a deck come from out of nowhere to start existing and doing very well. Malevolent Rumble is like the linchpin of so many green strategies these days. It's in this Gruul Eldrazi deck. It's in Hexproof. It's in Broodscale, which I'll talk about in a second. It's in Dredge now as well. It's like probably behind. It could even be the best card in MH3, to be honest, behind Refurbished Familiar and Broodscale. But we got Thraben Charm, giving white weenie decks the tool they need to actually do alright. Galvanic Discharge, another Scred that doesn't involve you having to play Snowlands, and Broodscale, along with Evolution Witness and Eviscerator's Insight to make its own deck, which did not exist until MH3. So, a lot of new cards making a decent impact. I had a quick look at like MH1 and MH2, and they had severe, like Arkham's Astrolabe got banned. There's Ephemerate in MH1. MH2 had, I didn't even include the lands, the cycling lands in here. But MH2 had Bridges, the Storm cards, and some other, and Sojourner's Companion. So it had 3 banned cards, the Bridges, and I don't know, 2 or 3 other sort of like Kitchen Imp, stuff like that made some decks exist, but nothing has come close to the amount of cards that MH3 has made, like, viable. So here is the current meta for the last 6 weeks in MH3. 6 weeks? 9 weeks. So we got Grixis Affinity up top. We've got Broodscale next. So I've split Broodscale into Jund and Golgari because there was a lot of people asking what their matchup spreads were. So we split them up as best I can. There's some sort of bleed over. Like, Golgari sometimes runs makeshift munitions, but I still called that. So Jund pretty much means if it's got Writhing Chrysalis or Cart Clan Shaman are the main draws to making it Jund. Golgari's pretty much just like mainly focused on the combo, while the Jund version has a little bit of a mid-range plan. So if you combine these two together, it makes 150. So it's actually going to be in second place behind Grixis Affinity. So that's why it's technically second. We have little Chris over here. Or Big Chris, I guess you should call him. So he's technically third because we've got the Stompy deck down here and Gruul Land Destruction. Both these decks are roughly the same. So you're just swapping the Land Destruction package for more creatures and or draw card spells. So if you merge them two together, you get 162, which ends up being just behind Broodscale and Affinity as place number 3. And we have Kuldotha, so finally Kuldotha actually gets its position. And then Mono Blue Terror, which has been slowly creeping up and has been doing quite well. And then a pile of other things like Magnus, Gardens, White Weenie, so all the mainstays. And then just like Demir Fey and Core Gates. Like, Core Gates has a decent amount here, but it has like really dropped off. Demir Fey didn't really stand a chance in this matter. So, let's talk about each of the matchups. So, Affinity. Affinity is only just, like, it's pretty much a 50-50 deck, but it is easily the highest percentage of every deck here. Yeah, most played deck by a decent margin. It has a very strong matchup spread, so look at all these green. Like, it's very good against most things, and we'll talk about its weaknesses. I like to talk about weaknesses more than strengths because, I don't know, it's fun to pick what decks are bad against, and then you can sort of try to figure out how to beat it. So, what does Affinity have problems with? Well, it seems to be 5 toughness creatures, which is why it has a bit of a loss against Terra, and then Writhing Chrysalis. So, the 2 Gruul decks doesn't have a great time with. Hexproof, I put Boggles over here, but Hexproof also makes big creatures very quickly. Otherwise, Dredge is a bit of a weird one. It just means they're not running Nihil Spellbomb main. Jund Broodscale, that one's because that's got Writhing Chrysalis, so that's the other reason as to why Jund Broodscale's why Affinity has a bad matchup against Jund, but a good matchup against Golgari. It's got the removal to deal with Golgari, but it doesn't have the it just can't deal with Writhing Chrysalis. It can't deal with Dust to Dust, which is why Core Gates and White Weenie are bad matchups. Otherwise, this is 50-50, so I won't really worry about that one. It's a good matchup against Kuldotha because it has Shaman to kill the board and life gain in the form of Reckoner's Bargain. And then it just, after it's done each of those once, Kuldotha usually can't win. It can outgrind Gardens. Well, everything else is pretty, like, Karkland Shaman is the main force behind most of these wins up here, like, against Elves, against Walls, and against Goblins, it's hard to get past an active Karkland Shaman. Because Affinity exists, and it just grinds so well against everything, it's pretty much driven out every other control deck currently. People still play Gardens, people still say Demir Terra, but, like, Core Gate, the control deck, it doesn't really exist anymore. I guess that's good enough for Affinity. Moving on. Broodscale. So Broodscale was on number 2. Pretty much 50-50. Like, it's pretty close to which one is better, Jund or Golgari. So we already know that Jund is better against Affinity, and Golgari is worse. So that's one of the main disparities between the two. But what else is there? So Golgari is, like, it's the quick, non-interactive combo deck. So it's good against things that don't have much interaction. So Core Gates is slow, and like its main removal was Journey to Nowhere, so it just couldn't deal with the quick nature of this combo, and Gruul Eldrazi just doesn't have the interaction to be able to stop it. Same with Walls, so like non-interactive combo, it's just faster than the other non-interactive combo. Yeah, White Weenie doesn't have the interaction. Broodscale doesn't have, like, Jund doesn't have the interaction, so you can see, like, how they play against each other. Golgari beats Jund because it's just faster. If they've got the Karkland Shaman out, it's harder, but just having more card draw, it just ignores Writhing Chrysalis, this deck. So that's why it's sort of good against the Writhing Chrysalis decks. But what is it bad against? It's bad against things with interaction and things with a quick clock. So Kuldotha, it's pretty bad against Kuldotha. Turn 1 or 2, a pile of 1/1s coming at you. Like, Kuldotha's clock is usually kills you on turn 3 or 4. which Broodscale can do as well, but it can't do it while playing around like several lightning bolt effects as well. It's also relatively bad against Grixis Affinity, mainly because Can't Clan Shaman in play is hard to deal with. People have gotten better to playing around it, but trying to play around both Can't Clan Shaman and a Galvanic Blast in hand is rather hard. Madness is just filled with to the brim with removal spells as well, same with Gardens. So that's why they're the rough matchups. On the Jund side, the same sort of thing happens here. So we've got Gardens, Kuldotha, Madness. So these sort of high interaction decks are good against Jund. But the main thing you want Jund for is mainly this Affinity matchup. Well, and also look at this land destruction. So it's sort of 50-50 for Golgari because it runs fewer lands. So it can get stumped by just one or two random land destruction spells. Well, Jund runs Wildfire and Indestructible lands, so and also Chrysalis to be able to block the opposing Chrysalis, so it just has a great time against land destruction. But yeah, the main reason why you want to run Jund is this Affinity matchup. I guess if you're expecting Gruul land destruction as well, you'd want to run this, but otherwise, sort of similar. Like, same weaknesses, but if you're trying to beat Affinity, I would go Jund. Otherwise, Golgari seems to be the more, like, it's got more positive matchups than the Jund one does. Okay, so now we're on Gruul ramp. As you can see by these win percentages, the land destruction has not been having a good time recently, and shifting to the more creature-heavy version seems to be paying off. So first off, we'll look at land destruction, in which it is mainly here to beat up on Golgari Gardens. So slow decks, like Blade is slow, Gardens is slow, Affinity is slow. Hexproof relies way too much on having one aura, like a pile of auras on one land, so blowing up that land does mean Hexproof has a sort of rough time. So this is what you're trying to beat with land destruction. I mean, Chrysalis is good against Affinity, and Golgari Gardens can't win if it can't drop its 5-drop to win. Otherwise, it doesn't seem to be doing well against most other things. Like, a lot of these are 50-50. Like, this is almost 50-50. This is almost 50-50. Terra doesn't really care too much about its lands. It's got Spell Pierce too, because it can just play 1 or 2 mana 5/5s and then counter any of their big creatures. Kuldotha, it beats you down way too quickly for you to deal with. Chrysalis helped this matchup slightly, but not enough to make it anywhere close to 50-50. Yeah, talked about the Broodscale matchups before. Not great against Jund Broodscale because it has Indestructible lands and Chrysalis. And also terrible against walls. So, like, walls and elves do not care about land destruction at all. So we compare this to the Eldrazi zombie version, and we shall see that, like, the positives, there's way more positives than negatives here. So the only thing that it seems to die to is uninteractive combo. So the two Broodscale decks here seem to be what is keeping Gruul Eldrazi in check. There has been some tech recently with Grixis Affinity where they've been running Can't Clan Shaman plus Toxin analysis to be able to actually have a chance against this deck, because currently they are not having a good time. At this stage, it's still not looking too great. But otherwise, yeah, look, this win percentage is good. It's just, if Broodscale is around, you do not want to play this. And that's really the only thing currently that I can say is, like, fantastic against this deck. Next. So onto Kuldotha. Kuldotha you cannot get rid of. It's like a bad smell that just will not leave. It is dropped a little compared to the last video, but it's still trugging along, still doing pretty well. Win rate is not great, but it matches. It wins where it needs to, and that is it's still keeping degeneracy in check, as I like to say. So it is pretty much beating the decks that no one, that sort of uninteractive combo, I guess. People don't like land destruction, people don't like Broodscale currently, and it's the deck that seems to be beating all of them. It's sort of the fun police, I guess. Yeah, Necessary Evil. Yeah, Hexproof tries to be the other aggro deck. I guess White Weenie is technically the other aggro deck, but it's just not as fast as Kuldotha and can't beat Broodscale. So you need red to be able to just have that clock to be able to do this. Main weaknesses to Kuldotha hasn't changed. It's still repeatable life gain and prismatic strands, which is what the bottom two are, and sweepers with like large amount of life gain, so Weather the Storm, which is what all of these. Oh, this is a sweeper. The Mono Blue Terror one is interesting because it doesn't have either of the two weaknesses I mentioned. It's mainly just because of Hydroblast, would be my guess, and just being able to play big creatures quickly. So you just need to counter all the relevant cards and then drop a 5/5 and they can't really do anything. And Hexproof's like large repeatable life gain. Yeah, lots of decks it's not great against, but it really shines in the matchups you need it to. And plus, sometimes you can just get the nuts draw and beat even some of these if you just go turn 1 Tomb Raider, attack, turn 2 double Tomb Raider, turn 3 sack a land to Kuldotha, Bushwhacker, kill. It happens. I think it happened to me last night, to be honest. Yeah, it's Kuldotha. You come to respect it sometimes. You still hate it, but you respect it. Onto the last of the big five, Blue Terror, which has surprisingly one of the best win rates, and there is not much that seems to be dealing with it at this point in time, to be honest. So its main weakness from the previous one seemed to be core gates, because it just had the right interaction and it could not deal with the repeatable life gain from Sacred Cat. Well, you can still see there it's got a little bit of a loss against core gates. But it's mainly here because it's got a great, well, I wouldn't say great, but it's got a decent matchup into Grixis Affinity and sort of a decent matchup into most other things, if not great against some other decks. Hexproof. It lives or dies by its draws. Sometimes you just don't find any creatures. Sometimes you find all the creatures but no lands to, no spells to put into your graveyard. But it's still very strong. So what I've written is the only obvious weakness that can be seen is quick ramp decks that go wide and tall. So, like, I put this elves. It cannot beat elves. Elves is, so this is the go wide and go tall, and same with Gruul, Eldrazi, Stompy. So these are the two decks that I feel have the best win rate against Terra, even though there's a couple other things in there as well. And repeatedly, I guess, playing Tithing Blade is also pretty decent against them. If you can resolve one is the issue. Yeah, if you expect a lot of Terror, which is sort of the fifth of the big five, then I suggest bringing elves. But otherwise, yeah. So, and also, what I find strange is that usually it's pretty bad against two removal piles, but, well, is it a different sort of removal pile? Because it's, removal usually can't deal with X5s, but Gardens can deal with X5s, but it's got a significantly decent win rate against it. So, usually against like cast downs plus Tithing Blade plus Snuff Out usually would be enough to deal with Terror. So I'm unsure why this is the case here. Maybe someone else can explain this to me. I don't know, but this is the one that really surprised me. I thought this would be worse. Maybe it's just been having good luck. I don't know. Hits the counter spells at the right time. Gardens does get a little clunky sometimes, where you just hitting random draw effects when you don't have an artifact in play, or not hitting land drops. So maybe that's just happened here one too many times. Unsure, but yeah, Terra and Gruul, Eldrazi, two highest win rates amongst everything that we talked about. All right, now I'm going to do my little matchup analysis thingy. So we have the big five here. So we go Affinity beats Red. Affinity does not actually, so it's got sort of 50-50. It beats one of the brood scales, but not both. So I didn't want to put an arrow there. And it does not beat the other two. So Affinity sort of beats like everything else. It's just got a good game plan against most decks. And the only one of the big five that has like a decently favorable matchup against most of the time is Red. So then, what do we do against Affinity? Well, we pick either Mono Blue Terror or one of the Gruul decks to try and beat Affinity. Well, we're talking about these two. Gruul deck beats Mono Blue Terror. But what's Red doing over here? Well, Red here is to try and beat these two, to beat the two degenerate go fast and high deck and the kill you on turn 3 deck. So we'll kill you on turn 4 instead with more removal. And we also have Broodscale beating red-green. So that's sort of how these big 5 play out. So the way to... So if you don't want to play any of these decks, you're going to try to figure out a way to beat at least 2 of these big 5, I think, with like have an okay game against 1 or 2 more. But you need like a solidly positive rate against 2 to even have a chance, I think. So what about if you wanted to try to beat these 2? Well, how about White Weenie, right? White Weenie is very good against both Affinity and Red. It's pretty bad against Broodscale. It's okay against these 2. So if you expect a lot of Broodscale, don't bring White Weenie. But if you expect a lot of these 2 and are happy enough to play against these, White Weenie's a great choice. What about these 2? Well, how about Gardens? Gardens is very good against Kuldotha. Just sweep away, gain some life. Usually post sideboard, but you can try and build your deck if you're trying to beat these 2 in general. And just having lots of removal is good against Broodscale. Worse against the Jund version, but still pretty good. And very good against the green-black one. But what happens if you want to beat these 2? Elves. Elves seems to crush both of these 2 decks because they have no interaction. Yeah, that's all I've really got to say. Just do not play against probably these 2. Affinity is bad, very bad, because of Karkland Shaman, and Red is okay-ish to bad because of just the festivities in the board. But hey, if you're willing to play the matchup lottery like I did on my challenge, and you play against these a bit, sometimes you can get there. Trying to beat these 2? Why not pick Core Gates? Whoops. It's also pretty good against Affinity, but it's mainly there to beat Red and Mono Blue. It's a dog against both of these, but it's good against 2 and okay against 1. So you just got to pick what you think you have to... You got to pick what you think you're going to play against and just hope that that happens. And then Madness was up here with amongst all the other like high played decks, and I was trying to figure out what Madness was actually good against, and it wasn't actually much. It's only really good against Gardens, and it's a dog to mono red, but it's sort of like Affinity in which it's like very average across the board. It's not great against, like, Affinity was only great against this. It's also good against Elves, but that didn't appear in the big 5. Rakdos is pretty... It's very good against Gardens, but very, like, bad. It's just medium, sort of, in general. Like, it was good against Broodscale as well. But yeah, that's like, roughly how the top decks are shaping out. You can put, like, Hexproof here. It's good against... It's a dog against this one, but it's good against here and here. So there's a lot of different decks you can choose. Just make sure you pick 2 decks of the big 5 that you're good against at least, and hope you play against those. Okay, so here is all the decks sorted by win rate. So what's as per usual, when you're not running many with the low player count decks, something weird always pops up on top. So this time it is Celestia Gates. So there was a pure green-white deck in the showcase, which we couldn't get the deck list for because they decided not to post anything below top 32. Pretty cool. It ran like Disciple of the Sun and Ceruli Gatekeeper, and I think it was mainly there just to try to beat Kuldotha, which it did multiple times, which was pretty cool. And then only like a week or 2 ago, there was a Naya Gates, which I put under the same banner because it's green-white base Gates. It just splashed red for removal. And it did alright. It got a 4-2. And yeah, so that's why that's high up. The other one I'll talk about is it Blitz? It's pretty... So I think Carrot Eater ran it both times. It's... You know how I said that you try to beat 2 of the decks, right? This is good against the non-interactive combo decks. So if you're trying to beat Gruul or Broodscale, this is a pretty decent choice. And you can just hope that you don't hit any of the removal piles. So you just drop a turn 2 Kiln Fiend or Festival Crasher and just go to town from there. Turn 3 wins every time. Not really, but it's sometimes happens. So some cool decks here. We will cull all the decks that have less than 10, and we end up here. So elves somehow has beaten all the odds to be on top here. It has had some ridiculous runs in challenges lately. It keeps getting 4-2s. I even made a top 8 there at one point. And what I kept saying is it's pretty much just playing the matchup lottery where it tries to avoid Affinity at all costs, even though it is the most played deck by like a decent margin. But it really preys upon some of the other decks like Terra and Eldrazi. So like 14 here, 10% here. Like you're hoping for this 10% and not this 14. And if you hit it, it's like a almost 100% win rate, right? It's sort of overtaken Walls. Like Walls still here, but that's because people have just decided to not play it because it's it's slower than Broodscale and bad against Affinity, so it just has more worse matchups than Elves. So Elves is the new Walls, apparently. And Goblins. Goblins is just... This is part of the problem as to when I do these data, right? So this is across 9 weeks. Goblins was fine, like it was great in the last meta, and some of that still bled over while people were still trying to figure out what was good in MH3. Like, it still did well in those first couple of weeks, but ever since people have found out the correct... Well, they're still trying to figure out the absolute correct Golgari Broodscale version. Broodscale is just a better version of Goblins. It's 2-card combo instead of 3. It doesn't require the graveyard. More card draw so you can dig more. It's just less pieces needed for the deck to function, and anyone who was on Goblins has pretty much just moved to Broodscale, and Goblins, in the next meta video, it may not even exist on this chart anymore, which is a shame. It was a cool deck. I'll probably take it to a challenge at one point when Grixis Affinity isn't running 3 Nihil Spellbomb main for some reason, and we'll see if we can make it work, but it gets to get its silver medal for this video, and I don't know, hopefully we'll see it again. Alright, so that's the wrap up for MH3 meta, or that's what you'd think, but thanks to Walker735, we got some Paupergeddon stats. So Paupergeddon Pisa happened like the 2nd or 3rd week into MH3. So it was like a 600 player event. So that's a lot of data I could have used. But why didn't I just put this with my other, with everything else that I did? Well, there's several reasons. There was 17 unknown decks. So it was sort of like the top 32 problem, but not as bad because 17 out of 600 and something is negligible almost. But I really just wanted to keep confirmation of data. So with the MTGO challenges, I know everything I've put in here. This one I'm relying on another source, I guess, was why I'm saying I wanted to keep it just as purely MTG results. And online and paper are different sort of metagames, which you will see with the amount of Ultratron that was at Paupergeddon. And the other main reason was because it was only 2 or 3 weeks in, it would have really skewed a lot of the results from my current analysis video. So there was like a lot of core gate because it was still like popular from the previous meta. And it would have really changed a lot if I put it with my Magic Online data. It was in a different format to what I'm used to, and I was trying to merge it. I did it like a couple of times, and every time I did it, the numbers were different, and I didn't know what was actually correct, so I just, decided not to. And another thing was they had Gleezard, that's what they decided to call it, the Broodscale combo, as just one thing. When there was there a Jund in the top 8? I think there was a lot of Golgari out there as well. I don't know. It's hard to tell. I don't know what was Jund and what was Golgari, and I wanted to keep that split in my data. So, here's the meta for Paupergeddon. Affinity was everywhere, and Land Destruction was not too far behind, because after a couple of weeks, if you remember the meta from the start of MH3, Affinity made it like a bucket load of trophies, and then Land Destruction, like straight after, once people found that Chrysalis was good, made a bucket load of trophies. So these were the two decks that everyone had on their radar going into Paupergeddon. So that's what was taken. And then like Core Gates was still relatively high. Same with Goblins, and Walls. All of these three decks just don't really exist in the past like 3 or 4 weeks. And you can see Affinity did not have a great time because it was picked on. It was known to be the deck to beat, so people packed a lot of stuff to pick on it. Broodscale was unknown, so it did its job pretty well. That's why its win rate's pretty high. Slivers was the surprise packet, having, I think, the highest win rate. Oh, I don't know what this Team of Cascade deck was, but my guess would be like Gruul, the Gruul ramp deck, but with Muldrifter in it. But yeah, Slivers had one of the best win rates. Surprises me too. Yeah, so you could pause the video and have a look at this if you want a bit more. There's not really much else to say here. I did do the matchup analysis for all of these decks. It is here. You can pause the video here if you want to look at them all. I'm not really going to talk too much about it, because it's sort of easy to talk about things, and I don't know, it looks ugly. I could have made it look nicer. But you can see, like, I'll talk about 2 of these. I'm going to talk about Affinity and Madness in a second, and compare them to the MTGO data. So, yeah, so let's talk a little about Ultratron. So Ultratron doesn't really exist online because it's a little clunky, and maybe the Italians just love to play Ultratron because there was a lot of percentage. So, like, here's some like good data for any of the Ultratron pilots. Maybe don't pick it up currently because it's not great against Broodscale. So just a slower, non-interactive combo deck. Okay against Blade, but Blade's a bit slow as well. Good against Jeskai because it's a big mana deck. Stuff like that. Bad against Land Destruction because it's a Tron deck, it requires lands. Stuff like that. So you can make assumptions from these results. Yeah, let's go with that. All right, moving on. Okay, so now we're going to compare the MTG results to the Paupergeddon results for Affinity, because they're the most played deck in both formats. So here's my like win percentage against specific decks, and here's what happens, and here's the Paupergeddon version. You can see it's sort of the same with like the good matchups up top are still the good matchups up top. The bad matchups down the bottom are still the bad matchups down the bottom. Look at that, 9-0 against White Weenie. Whew, that's some good stuff. The yellows are sort of still yellow. But the main differences here are these 3. So, Broodscale. So, my thoughts onto why Broodscale is better in challenges than it did at Paupergeddon was because it was very new at Paupergeddon. And also, I think most of these would have been Jund. So technically it should be like this one down here. I put Jund and Golgari as the same because they didn't split it. So I've just copied and pasted it across both. So this one should technically be the Jund one, which should be down the bottom. So that's why it's not. That's why it's not green. Gardens, not many games were played, so it's sort of hard to tell. So we'll just don't worry about that one. Blade, lots of Blade was played, and this I have no idea. I have no idea what's going on here. And same with Kuldotha. So like Kuldotha is usually, well, Affinity's pretty good against Kuldotha because of what I said before, right? Karkan Shaman, sweep the board, plus Reckoner's Bargain to gain the life back. And then from there, they can't really win. Maybe it was a lot of pilots new to Affinity because I thought it was the good deck. Maybe it was because they didn't respect Kuldotha and didn't run like the full Reckoner's Bargain package. Unsure. Maybe just Kuldotha was hot that day, but that's a very surprising result to me. I don't. Kuldotha did have a very good Paupergeddon. It had like a 55% win rate, which you saw from one of the previous slides. And Blade. Blade is an enigma of the deck to me. It seems to just pop up randomly, do okay, and then disappear off the face of the earth. Or it does badly for like 6 challenges and just disappears again. So maybe it was one of those times where it just had a good run. I don't know. I can't explain. But generally, Affinity is pretty good against Blade from my personal experience. This is pretty interesting. We'll also touch on Madness, which we didn't talk about before. So the challenge data you'll see here is new. So this one, there was a lot of things that were skewed. It's smaller sample sizes for both compared to Affinity, obviously. So this is challenge, this is Paupergeddon. So that's the amount of matches. This was for Affinity, this was for Madness. So it's like half the amount on sort of both sides. My explanation as to why the green and the yellow have swapped around is because Madness is a very draw-dependent deck rather than matchup-dependent. If you draw your discard outlets plus Madness cards, you are generally in for a good time. If you just draw the Madness cards and no discard outlets, you are not having a good time. And trust me, I played this deck yesterday. And I kept getting mana screwed was my main issue. Kept getting color screwed. Had red not black or black not red. You can cast half your hand and not the other. And then you draw a sneaky snacker and you go, what can I do with this? You don't have a discard outlet. Here, it's positive against Gardens because Gardens just doesn't have the life gain. You just burn them out. They do post board, but they've generally lost game 1, so they need to win 2 post games. So generally can sneak in that win. And it's pretty good against Broodscale because you just got all that interaction to be able to try to kill their stuff and then just pluck them in the air with 2 power flyers. Which, like, that sort of matches up. Broodscale was sort of new, so I can understand how people didn't interact with it favorably at Paupergeddon. Walls 50-50, land destruction is sort of 50-50. And then we got, like, these sort of not very many played. So, like, White Weenie. White Weenie's interesting. So it's sort of 50-50 because a lot of the burn is not red. So Prismatic Strand doesn't work. So that's how you get your wins. It feels very 50-50 playing from both sides. So it just had a good luck day there. It beat Affinity. I think it had the same reasoning as to why Kuldotha was good against Affinity. And that's because of just not running as many Reckoner's Bargains as I think they should be. Affinity just had a bad day against all sorts of burn at Paupergeddon. Dimir Terra. I beat Dimir Terra yesterday too. It's just luck. If they put their unexpected fangs, if they put the fangs on the Terra, you're gonna have a bad time. If they don't do that, you generally win. So it's just hoping that they draw the wrong stuff there instead of you drawing the right stuff. But yeah, don't pretty much. And this last line here, as you can see, like everything's all different. Don't take any of this as like hard and fast rules like, oh yeah, Affinity always beats red or stuff like that. Or even just saying like even Elves, which had the 10-0 against Mono Blue. I've lost against Mono Blue as Elves once or twice in a league. Mainly because you just mulligan to nothing or they just hit the exact perfect boomerangs to screw you over. Nothing is 100%. Let's just go with that. Okay, so now we actually wrap it up. Instead of the fake out we did before. So MH3 really shook things up. A lot of cards. New Big 5. Well, technically 2 of the Big 5 have stayed, but 3 new decks have entered the top 5 decks. And really any deck can win a challenge just as long as you find those like 2 or 3 like very good matchups. So recently, both Hexproof and Dredge within the past like 3 weeks or so managed to win a challenge. Like, and they barely hit the 10 deck threshold on my list to be able to show up on the win percentages. Anything can happen. You can bring whatever you like. It's not like there's 5 decks that are good, but you can bring anything. Some people are saying it's a Brewer's Paradise. It's not really a Brewer's Paradise, but it's still a lot of viable decks that you can try and find. You just need to make sure that, yeah, your deck has some good matchup against the Big 5. And my suggestion here is to at least have cheap interaction or a quick clock, or you'll be left behind. because you need the cheap interaction to deal with either Kuldotha or Broodscale, or you need a quick clock to be able to deal with the ramp decks, because they will just leave you in the dust if you... and Affinity. They will leave you in the dust if you don't try to deal with them quickly. And here's the cheap interaction that you need to probably be running. Galvanic Discharge has been slowly climbing up in play, because, yeah, they decided to put it in blue-red as well as Scred, so things keep changing. It's a good time. It's a good time. Okay, so now it's time to go to the shill part of the video, where I'm going to say that I have started a coffee account, Ko-Fi. Not a big fan of Patreon. This has lower fees, so that's why I've started this. And it was only because of one person who just wanted to give me money. I do not know why they wanted to give me money, but I started this up just as a place if people want to contribute. So they gave me like enough money for 3 challenges to be able to enter. If I can't find someone to help get the data for me, I can at least enter it, drop, and watch the replays afterwards. So it's very helpful. Yeah, so if anyone wants to help that way, they can. And I have decided to use this, so you can post images there. When I'm watching replays, if I see any deck that doesn't make top 32 that I think is cool, I'm going to post like what I can of their list that I see and give a little explanation, just so like people who take their decks think they like just to make it show on MTG Goldfish or whatever, but it doesn't happen. This is just a place to show that off. I posted one, like there hadn't been many from I did fix this up, the 21st of June. This was the last one I did, but I did do one yesterday, so you can check that out if you want. If anyone else has any suggestions as to what to put here, I'm all willing for suggestions. I thought this was just a cool thing, and then I'm not flooding my Twitter feed. Speaking of Twitter, that's where I post meta wrap-up of each challenge. Recently, instead of just doing the spreadsheets of meta percent and win percent, I've been doing all the pairings, all the results of all the players, and a couple of decks as well, which is, I don't know, I think it looks a little nicer, which is this one. I've switched the pictures around by accident. And the top one there is, I'm now doing wrap-ups of all the matchup data for a weekend on like the Tuesday or Wednesday after a challenge. So think of that tweet as like a mini one of these videos every week, which I got a lot of good traction on that tweet, so expect to see more of them. And also I post top 8s if I ever manage to make a top 8 sometimes. Last one was Elves, which I did post a video on. You can check that out if you want. And that's it. We made it through another one. I want to give a couple of shout-outs. One to GN42. Mainly, just thanks, GN, for doing the Sunday data for me. If anyone can help take the load off GN if he doesn't want to play, I would be much appreciated. Teasdale and Casting Commons for using the tweets I do every week. They talk about it and make good use of it. I appreciate that very much. Carly also uses it on their Trophy Tuesdays. Yeah, you can check that out as well. And Don D, who was the person that made me start the Ko-Fi and donated me money. I want to give you a shout out because I don't know why people are giving me money. I didn't ask for it, but I'll take it. Thank you. And to you for watching this video. Thank you very much. That's another one of these done. We'll do another one eventually once the meta shakes up again, or just to see how it's going. If you want to know, if anyone has any suggestions on how to do these or whatever, if you want to see more info, let me know. I'll try and do what I can. I added the Paupergeddon one this time from a suggestion last time. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. And we'll see you all in the next one. Peace.